Good morning. And thank you very, very much for joining the STACS Showcase, I think, well, for day one on a Monday morning. Very much hope that you guys are primed and ready for an exciting series of conversations over the next little while. Kicking off with, obviously, with the best one right now on sustainability. So this conversation is all about basically sustainability and how that's actually happening in practice. And the timing for this conversation couldn't be better from if you think about not only in a Singapore context and the rapid rollout of the Singapore Green Plan for 2030 and the huge steps that are being taken every day, but also obviously right now what's going on in Glasgow with COP26 and all of the different discussions that are playing out that are going to set not only the framework but also the rule books for how sustainability is defined and measured over the coming several years. So what we're going to do in this conversation is I'm just going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to go through, as I said, a kind of quite a specific practical conversation really around sustainability, around all the areas that we have. And what's fantastic is that we have a representation from every angle of the kind of financial sector today. So we're going to be able to give you a really excellent perspective on what's going on. So to kick off the introductions, my name is Barnaby Nelson. I run the ValueExchange, which is a market research and sales enablement firm focused very much on blockchain and DLT. And so this space is something that we're especially focused on and an area that we're especially passionate about. So just to go around the room in no particular order, just the way they appear on screen. Derrick, you have the fortunate position of being top left. So perhaps you could just give us a quick 2-minute introduction from your side. Now, am I alone in that I can't hear Derrick?
No, I can't hear him too.
Oh, I thought it was just me. We've had minor sound issues already this morning. So, Derrick, do you want to just try one more time? No. Okay. Just to very quickly summarize, Derrick is COO at Nexus Frontier Technologies, and we'll hopefully be able to hear more about that as we go into the panel. But Jasper, you fortunately are next in line. So if you could just give us a quick introduction of yourself and that amazing painting behind you.
Okay, thank you. Morning, everyone. Morning, Bunny, and also thank you to STACS for the invitation to speak on this panel. My name is Jasper Wong, so I head up the construction and infrastructure as part of the sector solutions group for UOB. So effectively, we are the industry coverage from industry side for the wholesale banking for construction and infrastructure. And great to be here today. I look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Jasper. And Mr. Ong Wei Han, we have from JP Morgan. Perhaps, hopefully, speakers permitting, a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi, Barnaby, you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. So Wei Han Ong, JP Morgan. I'm the Senior Country Business Manager for South and Southeast Asia, which involves 7 countries in the region. India, Singapore, the 2 big countries we have, as well as our presence in all the local countries in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines. And my job involves a lot of sustainability in terms of our internal operations. And obviously, in this part of the world, you guys would have known that and in the COP26, the South and Southeast Asia countries are very much in the headlines of, I just saw the deforestation type commitment that was actually being mentioned. So very topical for us in this part of the world, and happy to learn from the panel. But similar to Jasper, very honored to be invited by STACS to come in and say my 2 cents and hopefully learn a lot more than my 2 cents.
Brilliant. I'm sure we'll get more than 2 cents worth out of you today. But now, Derrick, how are we getting on? Have you? Can we hear you now? No, still not, I'm afraid. No, we will resort to your either sign language, or if you've got a pen and paper next to it, we'll do the whole thing by manual processes. Like all good technologies, it begins with manual processes and goes from there. But maybe we can start off first of all with a quick set of definitions, because I think obviously, you know, as we've already said, COP26 all the way down to kind of our own lifestyles, you know, sustainability has many different angles, many different definitions, manifestations, and so on and so forth. And we have, I think what's great is that Jasper, you know, very much from a construction, you know, you've got a very strong industrial focus in one of the biggest problem areas, if you like. What, Jasper, from your perspective, how do you define sustainability from a well, let's say professional perspective?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Barney. I guess sustainability, I guess, is now extremely urgent, as Wei Han has mentioned. You know, with the message from COP26, and also the various governments have now committed to stop building new coal-fired power plants. To try to keep the temperature rise to below 2 degrees or 1.9 degrees. You know, we can no longer put off our efforts to fight the climate crisis. You know, and I think the time to act is now, because by 2050, you know, the global population will grow to about close to 10 billion, and then the urbanization of the cities percentage-wise will grow up to 68% roughly from today's 55. And if you have read the research, it's saying that by 2030, top 5 mega cities in the world, 4 out of 5, 4 of them will be in Asia. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that we need to do quickly within the next shorter than 10 years now, to actually help address the climate crisis. Now, UOB's roles as a strategic partner is to assure that, you know, our clients continue to grow and succeed, you know, through economic cycles and industry changes. And how we're doing that is by incorporating sustainability principles, so ESG impacts, into our corporate strategies, into our funding, into our investment decisions, as well as developing, you know, our product solutions or services, so that bank can support and also promote environmentally friendly and socially responsible projects, as well as helping our clients to transit to a more sustainable business in the long run. And one of the things that, you know, I can talk later on is about our smart city sustainable finance framework, where one of our programs is called the U Solar program. So our goal from UOB perspective is to simplify sustainability for business. So that's something that we see as important for the bank.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. And so, Wei Han, from a JP Morgan perspective, obviously, you know, as you said, you know, it's obviously something that's keeping you very, very, very busy. What is the kind of common set of definitions that you would use then to underpin all of the various sustainability projects and engagements that you have going on at the moment?
Yeah, so Bunny, yeah, exactly as you said, you know, in JP Morgan, not very dissimilar to what Jasper mentioned, but, you know, I just add a few things to his comments. I think one, obviously, as a bank, is one thing. Before I talked about the client, our internal operation has to be sustainable, right? JP Morgan is a global bank. We are in 100 over countries. And to be sustainable across those countries is a huge challenge itself. But I'm glad to say that last year we actually achieved carbon neutral in all our operations by improving efficiency in our energy use, sourcing renewables, and the journey continues, right? So I think we have a commitment by 2025 to reduce our paper use by 90%, moving into electric vehicles. So first and foremost, for banks, we just need to make sure that we've achieved carbon neutrality in our internal operations itself, and maintain it, right? Maintaining it is not always the easiest. I think the second thing is I would add is similar to Jasper, right, on the client side, but that's where I'm heartened to see a lot of the technology innovation is coming in. But on the client side, JP Morgan has made a commitment of 2.5 trillion of sustainable financing from now to 2030. Now sounds like a big number, but when I hear about any type of transition budget, people are talking about trillions of dollars a year, right? Yeah. So we're putting a small piece of that into the equation. Let's talk about carbon transition is a very expensive exercise. I don't think there's a more expensive exercise that the world has ever undertaken in the history of mankind, right? So I think banks has a big part to play to be a financier. Besides the 2.5 trillion, we've been very specific, right? So we picked 3 specific sectors to focus on. One is electricity power generators. 2 is oil and gas. 3 is automobile manufacturing to start. Why these 3 sectors, you might ask? Basically, these are the ones with the highest greenhouse emission sectors. Also, data is available for us, right? The carbon intensity, what they have actually publicly committed, as well as a pathway towards the Paris Agreement. So we are focusing on these 3 sectors. We have actually undertaken interim commitment to 2030 on reducing their carbon intensity within our client portfolio, and we'll expand to more sectors as this evolves. And all these things happen really quick and fast, right, Barney? Because these things, what I just announced is not like 1 or 2 years old. It's just over the last 6 to 12 months, and I'm expecting a lot of things to happen from now to then to the 2030 timeline.
Absolutely, because I think for me, what's really fascinating to your point is, obviously, you describe it really well. The banks are there for 2 things. One is obviously as a body corporate themselves, we have to make sure that we're reducing our own net carbon footprint. But also 2, we've got to be able to provide financing back in to facilitate the huge carbon transition that has to go on. And it's really, for me, that second piece, I think it'd be really interesting. What challenges does that throw up? Because ultimately, financing an organization, if you go back 10 years, it's about balance sheet, it's about, fundamentals, it's about things that you can look up on paper. Whereas now, to your point, you're looking at data points, you're looking at, whole ranges of information and analytics that basically have never really been used before. So, in terms of how do you find the journey has been in terms of actually operationalizing that kind of oversight? Because it must be very different now to offer financing versus, for example, 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, but in fact, I would add that giving a global perspective to this, the Europeans tends to be a little bit ahead, right? Because they started off first. US is, I think, coming up to speed. In Asia, we are a little bit doing catch up, right? I would just put that comment in terms of what's happening across this space. But Barney, you are right. The challenge is quite well publicized. One, everyone is searching for the common taxonomy. What is not green and green differs between different countries. Now in JP Morgan, we don't wait for that. So one of the things we did was we created our own methodology called Carbon Compass, using an external consultant to put in the science into this, right? So I think a lot of people tend to read headlines, but it's a complicated science that underpin it, between the 1.5 degrees Paris Agreement 2050 down to sectorial carbon emission, down to country carbon emission. I can't say I'm an expert of it, but there's a lot of science underpinning it. And we actually set up first a carbon methodology. Second thing, we've set up a Center for Carbon Transition getting a lot of experts to get themselves involved to learn about the science, underpin it to our transition portfolio. So I would just say that we are still in a learning process.
Yeah.
But we don't wait for the world to get themselves organized. Obviously, if everybody can agree a common taxonomy, we just follow, that would be fantastic. But I'm still an optimist that the world will get to that, but I don't think it's going to be that quickly.
Well, I think this is the challenge, isn't it? I think it's easy to look over, to your point, to Europe in particular and say they've got it right. But ultimately, I'm sure if you speak to most Europeans, they're saying, God, we're only at step 1 of 1,000, you know. But I think to your point about the fact that this is, you know, it all rests on taxonomy and technology. And that's where, if Derrick, if you're able to join back in, I mean, it'd be really interesting to hear your take on how this is operationalizing itself. How is sustainability, you know, operationalizing in terms of, you know, the daily processes, if you like, and what changes you're seeing to how banks function today, I suppose.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Magic.
Thank you. Thank you. Apologies, everyone, and thanks for the question. I think I was following Wei-Han and Jasper. I think one of the key challenges, I think for us at Nexus, we are an AI company and we work with banks and asset managers to build tools for automating, you know, financial data processing and analysis. And as you can guess, in the last 2 years, a lot of focus has been in terms of how to source, harmonize data, you know, like what we had mentioned. Exactly like you shared, I think one of the key challenges in operationalizing the ESG investing, at least from an asset manager's perspective, within Asia, I think not only it's the taxonomy challenge. I think in this COP26 or so, there are some attempts to harmonize EU and let's say China's taxonomy, with China's one a bit more focused on bond sort of instruments, whereas EU's is a lot more sweeping. So there are attempts to do that. But I think there are also particular challenges with language and the local context. For example, investors looking into China, you can't, you know, it's not easy to take a global standard and, you know, and impose it on China. A lot of it is driven by the local policies. You know, what may not be very ESG in the global standard can be highly ESG in the Chinese market. So that's one, I think, the local context. And then the second is in terms of of course, the language. Google Translate unfortunately does not work very well in terms of being able to, you know, pull out all sorts of unstructured data from Chinese documents, and a lot of ground reporting will take place on the local language. It takes a while before it hits the more international media and reports. So at Nexus, I think we work with some of our asset manager clients with large exposures in China. There's teams on the ground to, you know, I think this is where we see the potential of AI to be able to help to scale the sourcing, aggregation, and then the representation of ESG data, particularly in Chinese and for, I think, international investors to consume. So obviously, you know, AI itself is new, and this space is evolving. So I think that's where it's also exciting for us. And just to answer your question, I think a lot of a bit of guesswork and a little bit of courage, like what Wei-Han said, you can't do things to the dust to settle. We just have to take a bit of experiment sort of driven approach, and we believe that, you know, that is what can really create a systematic way of incorporating ESG data in the region. So thanks again for patching me back into this conversation, and apologies for the
fantastic
issues.
You paint a very clear picture of, I think, of the challenges, and I think, you know, I love the guesswork and courage. I think is a great way of summarizing it, because ultimately this is I think there's too many people who tend to assume that it's binary, as in you either have great data or you have nothing. But to your point, you know, presumably any data is better than none in terms of trying to move in the right direction. So maybe, Jasper, I mean, we talked about some of the challenges, and we can expand on those in a minute. But you mentioned UOB's U-Solar program. Mm-hmm. Do you mind maybe just giving us a quick overview of effectively of what that is and how that plays into the sustainability story?
Yeah, thanks, Barney. So with regards to Youth Solar Program, so Youth Solar Program is Asia's first integrated solar energy financing platform that we have launched back in 2019 that covers 4 countries, so Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. And even though we are focusing on these 4 countries, we have also picked up solar programs, solar projects that are outside of these 4 countries, like in Vietnam, which is actually quite a hot topic nowadays. Now, the Youth Solar Program actually is birthed out of our Smart City Sustainable Framework. So I want to go back to sort of supplement to what Wei Han has mentioned. So because we cannot wait for the taxonomy to be standardized before we do anything, and our clients are chasing after us and say that can you support us in this and support us in that. So what we did was the bank has actually set up 4 financing framework, so similar to what JP Morgan has done. So UOB has also set up our own direction regards to sustainability. So there are 4 frameworks that cover real estate, smart city, green circular economy, and then green trade finance framework. So why do we set up these 4 frameworks is to guide in terms of how we incorporate our solutions, our products, and our processes to help our clients to deal with what they are doing today, right? So these 4 frameworks will cover about 80-90% of the businesses that our clients are in, right? Now, coming back to Smart City Framework. So for Smart City Framework, we have 7 pillars in that. So the first one is renewable energy. So renewable energy we covers solar, wind, geothermal, and mini hydro. Second thing is green building construction. So there's a lot of constructions nowadays dealing with green buildings, right? So we are able to accord a green loan to a contractor if they can come to us and prove with certainty that they are building a green building, right? Third thing is energy efficiency. This is another big topic nowadays in terms of how do you optimize your energy usage and how we can help them to save costs by having a baseline study, which is coming back to technology. We can talk about that. Then the fourth pillar is green transport. So nowadays another hot topic for Singapore. We've launched our U-Drive program, and this deals with the electric vehicle as well as the charge point infrastructure. So we do have a financing framework or green financing framework for that. And then the 5th and the 6th pillar covers water and waste water management. So all the recycling, waste to energy, biomass, and those are fairly another important topic regards to zero waste. Right nowadays, you're all talking about recycling, reduce, reuse, and recycle. The last thing that we have is the climate change adaptation. So climate change adaptation is a bit fairly new because it deals with hydrogen technology or carbon capture, right? So these are the 7 pillars that we have, right? Now, in terms of coming back to Youth Solar, the Youth Solar program actually covers the entire value chain from solar developers, contractors, operators, as well as the end user. So what we wanted to do instead of just say that, hey, if you have a solar financing need, please come to us, right? And we can finance you. So rather doing that, we actually set up a program with 15 partners across the region. And what we wanted to do was promote local solar champions companies, whether they are developers or whether they are contractors, to actually work with them hand in hand to actually grow their business. It's important for us to work with them, to grow with them, so that they allow their business to prosper, as well as to also from an ESG angle to do more solar, right? Solarize the roof for their clients or also for our clients as well. So that is something that we have been focusing for the last 2 years, and the results have been fairly encouraging. We currently have already more than 200 gigawatt hours of solar energy produced, and that's equivalent to, if you want to put it, a greenhouse gas impact is 113,000 CO2 avoided, 25,000 cars taken on the road, or equivalent to about 1.8 million trees planted. So that's how we measure impact, right? Barnaby, just now you mentioned, how do we look at sustainability, and sustainability, yes, it can be measured by dollar and cents, but we also measure them by the impact that it makes to the environment. And that we see that, coming back to technology itself, I think three things is important for sustainability to scale up. One is regulatory taxonomy, right? Second thing is finance. Hopefully there are sufficiently strong, bankable, and sustainable solutions out there for clients to adopt. And the third thing is technology in terms of tracking and measurement. Recently we actually work with industry such as STACS on a pilot called the CO2X, which effectively focus on committing to jointly develop a platform for local corporates or SMEs with accessible carbon tracking solutions and green financial services, through data-driven approach. And this is very new, because it used to be where the company will know how far the driver has drive. They need to make certain how many stops in a day and how many deliveries. Right now they can even track the behavior of how the driver is driving, and how they can whether they speed up or slow down, or go somewhere else, and not following the most optimal track. So through data, the company can actually start benchmarking against what they have done previously versus what they can do in the future. And through this data capturing approach, we can actually monetize the savings, and hopefully in the future allow the monetization of these carbon credits to be traded on the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. No, look, and thank you, because what really comes through very clearly is not only the fact that you are across all of the areas of kind of sustainability, is to your point about the various pillars, but also just the that point at the end. It's there is this massive proliferation of data, disparate data. Ultimately, huge volumes of information we're able to now produce with IoT, with satellite monitoring. As you can put anyway, huge quantities of data. But I guess before we dig a little bit further into the STACS side of it, just a question for Wei Han. From a JP Morgan perspective, you're a consumer of that data from a financing perspective, as much as you are, a vested interest in the process. How have you found your organization kind of has had to change to adapt? Because ultimately, you're being thrown potentially enormous volumes of very random data sets at you. As Jasper mentions, a guy driving a truck in some country, wherever it is, you've got to turn that into something useful that then drives the cost of finance ultimately. How have you made that journey, if you like, from kind of data availability to actually turning it into something useful?
No, Barney, I think in short, and I will elaborate, we're still in a learning process, right? I think it's early on. But one thing I would say is that to ensure you understand the data of what you're getting, you need to know it yourself. Hence, our bank is investing in this Center for Carbon Transition, right? You can't just take the data on the literal value. You need to understand what climate change is and what it entails. So data is not good enough. You need to know what data is looking for, what trusted source. I know about STACS, using blockchain to make sure that we have a trusted source. So I think all those innovation will help us get there. I think that's the first point I will make. Second point I will make is, as what Jasper mentioned, right? Increasingly, our clients is looking to banks to be the trusted advisor, right? So it's important for us to not just know where the data is, understand the data, and translate that into advice for our clients, right? Nowhere in banks you see us as labeled as climate advisors, but for anything that for client, and I'm sure I see Jasper smiling, anything that costs money, clients will naturally come to the bank and say, hey, can you help me and understand this and finance this, and how much I might have to pay for it, right? So naturally, banks somehow sit into that position, advise clients. Now, can I say that the whole financial industry is ready for it? No. If you look at COP26, there are more changes happening in there. So I think that's the second point I will make, that we need to also be understanding the data and expert of the data when we advise our clients. And the third point I will make is, data is good at a surface level, right? But I have a very markets background in my career in JP Morgan. I believe that data is only useful or most useful when you can translate that into economic costs, right? And Jasper alluded to it. We need to have a functional carbon market, right? It's heartening for me to see, in Singapore, the SGX pioneering the climate impact exchange. They did the first auction, 1st of November. Good timing with COP26. But we need to be able to price, the carbon costs effectively, consistently, right? Because then data drive that, right? That how do you use data to drive an efficient carbon market whereby, we can then make the journey from now is 2021 to 2050 a lot more transparent. Without that, I can't differentiate efficient green building with an electric vehicle, with a polluting, petroleum company that unfortunately we can't transition over. So I think we need some common benchmark on that.
Yeah, 100%. No, absolutely. And I think this is back to Jasper's point. If you're quantifying everything in in tons or megatons of carbon offset, of carbon avoidance, ultimately you have to be able to map that back to a dollars and cents cost. And I think at the moment we run out of ground when we kind of talk about this much carbon saved. To your point, this many road journeys, this many trips to the moon, that kind of thing. But ultimately, we can't put it accurately into a dollars and cents world. And as you said, therefore, the whole access to financing, the whole financial markets can't really be built around it. Absolutely. And I think actually, and I'm going to come on to Zach in just a second to talk us through the STACS solution. But I think one thing, Derrick, if I may, beforehand, is just we've kind of gone through the two of the three pillars in my view. You've got basic data, you've got competency to manage the data, so Jasper ran through the kind of data side, Wei Han's run through the kind of competency of managing the data, and then you've got the trust. Ultimately, the biggest challenge that we face in the carbon and generally the sustainability space is trust in the information and what we're getting. When your asset manager clients, how do they manage the whole question of trust? Because trust isn't absolute, and to your point, a lot of trial and error, a lot of best efforts. How do they manage that today from a dependability and trust perspective?
Yep. Thanks for the question. I think that is certainly very relevant and one of the key questions that people always ask, especially when you look at, let's say, public data. With fake news being the thing now, how do you even know whether to react and when to react to certain data? I think there are 2 points I would make, I think, into this point, which is also, I think, what Jasper and Wei Han briefly mentioned. I think one is for asset managers, they have to go deep into a particular use case, right? I think it's too ambitious to think of trust as a breadth problem. It's just not possible to cover sort of like trusted data sources if you think of multiple investment use cases or even geographies. So the key is one to go very deep into a particular either asset or sector or data type and sort of connect, I think, the end-to-end data flow from the data source to the data consumption. And that's where I think part of this panel's title, collective technology, I think it's difficult for any one provider to do that, and there'll be a lot of intermediaries. So for asset managers, and asset managers, they also differentiate themselves by having their own unique ways of assessing and also analyzing the data. So I think the first point is being very use case specific, very targeted. If not, you'll be overwhelmed by the sort of the big data problem. So that's one. I think the second is that every asset manager, like I said, even banks, you kind of need to have something different, right? Your own secret sauce, right? To evaluate risks and opportunities. And I think now where we see is, I think some of the early movers, they are starting to do this systematically. Trying to leapfrog the whole Excel spreadsheet, all the questionnaires and get the data. So looking at systems and tools that can help them build their sort of bottom-up methodologies, right, to translate ESG data and, like what Rehan mentioned, into quantifiable ESG risk scores. And you need a tool that allows you to set up fast and also to track your own data consumption behaviors and systematically over time. So I think this is the second area where we see, I think definitely in more maybe in Europe and US, the larger asset managers are already building their own in-house tools. And here in Asia, like we had mentioned earlier, people are still starting to do this. And that's where we as Nexus, we as an AI software provider, we are building sort of integrated tools to help asset managers get started on their journey. So it's almost like a CRM for ESG data. Once you start doing it systematically, you can build up a very strong and foundation to do this. And as the taxonomies evolve, as data comes, your organization framework gets stronger and stronger. I would say, most people are like version maybe 0.1. The largest ones are like maybe 1 moving to 1.1. But you have to invest early and not rely on external sources. So I think that the second way is how do you systematically approach this to implement your secret sauce. And that's where I think Nexus is quite excited to create some tools and solutions for this.
Brilliant. No, look, thank you so much, because that really, I think the specialism point really makes sense. And I think this idea of also a bit of an arms race almost, that that there are the people who are just getting started and the people who are not necessarily finishing the journey but far more advanced makes a lot of sense. So Zach, talk to us about STACS' role in this space. So we've talked about the challenges, we've talked about the big pillars of what really makes and breaks this. From a collaborative angle, obviously STACS does this kind of thing brilliantly in terms of bringing people across the industry together to be able to really make something happen. Maybe you can give us a few minutes on essentially how your view is on this.
All right, thanks, Barney. Hi, everyone. I'm Zach, Business Development Manager at STACS. So STACS is a multi-award winning Singapore FinTech. We have a ready blockchain infrastructure that aims to simplify global markets, unlock value, and empower sustainable finance for the financial industry. So the couple of few months that we have been in contact and in continuous discussions with the industry, and of course, we initially started out interfacing with the financial industry, of course, with our very close partners like UOB, like Jasper. So what we have eventually found out is that there's a huge funding gap in green finance. So what was the reason that we discussed is that because there's this entire lack of efficient common infrastructure to act as a nexus between the financial industry and all these ESG projects. So what we have actually been building, of course, together with the MAS, is on Project Greenprint, which will be announced tomorrow, is that we are going to be creating this ESG registry, whereby corporates will come on board in individual industry verticals to actually store their data onto the blockchain. And as mentioned by Jasper, one of the very key industry verticals that we have successfully announced was the transport and logistics sector, whereby there's a consortium called CO2 Connect, whereby they are working with very good partners like Essen and Evercom to actually pull the data from all these insights from their fleet management system. And all these data will then be stored on the registry. So how will this registry benefit both corporates and FIs? Is that FIs will now have a center or source of truth to be able to pull all these data and to be able to verify all this green data that is coming in to eventually give out green loans, right? So that is the upstream portion all the way to the downstream. And also furthermore, we work with great partners like Nexus Frontier Tech. So Nexus Frontier, they will be able to pull all this data, and then all this data, then they will do their AI and data analytics on all this data and provide actionable insights to these asset managers like he mentioned. Yeah.
It's a very complete story, isn't it, really? I guess, for me, I think, the point about, the fundamental point we're talking about here consistently comes back to reliable data. And I guess for me, one of the things that I would just drilling into that a little bit more, we're talking about huge availability of data. In terms of, not to harp on about the trust point, but how do you guys feel, excuse me, how do you guys feel the trust is, the dependability is of the information that's out there at the moment? Because obviously we know that there's a lot of very publicized cases of people, misusing information, totally, misallocating carbon credits because of the fact they're saying that they're not cutting down a forest that's been there for 100 years and nobody was going to cut it down anyway, but they're taking credit for it, that kind of thing. How do you find that the usability of the data that you're receiving across the various areas, and as a result, how does that strengthen or undermine the processes that you're building on top of that? I don't know if anyone's got a particular view. Maybe Wei Han?
Yeah, no, my take is, this takes a journey, right? I think it's very typical when you have, something that actually shakes the world and everybody struggle to get sense of it. There's a lot of data out there, greenwashing out there. I think if you think about, we're in the middle of a pandemic still. So when COVID started, something similar happens to different countries reporting different things, and took us a year and a half to now finally all agree what to measure, number of cases per 100,000. So the world will get there. I feel that this is just a time of flux where people are just doing a bit of pathfinding, searching. So I think it's healthy. I don't think it's necessarily bad. The only bad thing is obviously the Earth doesn't have so much time for us to slowly find out, right? So I think that's the first point I would make. Second point I will make is that, we talk about the blockchain technology, right? And I always like to translate it to human behavior, right? Blockchain is so-called a new technology, but if you think about the principle underpinning blockchain, it's actually not new. Basically, we will get the dust settled when we have a group of trusted people, countries, organization come together and agree that this is what we're going to recognize.
Yeah.
Right? So that's blockchain principle. It's no different from, what COP26 is trying to achieve, what a lot of organization is trying to achieve. I think JP Morgan, we just joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance, right? So that's the organization where it connects all the banks. We share all our knowledge and information. It just gets started. Hopefully that will be one avenue where we can all agree what is actually the data we need and what is actually not good data, right? So, and I know talking to, some of the startups, the technology is available. Let's wait. They're waiting for the community to get themselves organized. Who are the people that's going to determine what is the data that we should use? And to me, that's really the next phase. Meanwhile, as I said earlier, we just have to look at what and that's why we picked focus industry, right? I think, Barney, as I mentioned earlier, why we're only picking 3 specific industries and not everything else, because, these 3, we can actually spend a lot more time understanding a little bit more, developing the capability and all that. But I believe that the end path is really trying to get like-minded or key players to come and agree on the data that's needed.
Yeah. And so, Jasper, from your perspective, to this point about, ultimately the collective solution. I mean, you mentioned working with STACS. How has how's the work that you've been doing with STACS informed and changed the way that you come to the whole question about data collection, data trust, data processing in the sustainability space?
Yeah, I think from a UOB perspective, obviously, like Wei Han has mentioned, the banking sector is still going through that transformation ourselves, right? If you look at 10 years ago, we were all still talking about financing coal-fired power plant, and nowadays, you hardly find any international banks or regional banks that actually say that they will commit to finance coal-fired power plant, and that's the changes that are going through, and it's happening fast and furious, right? And in terms of data wise, what I can say is that it needs to be actionable data, right? I mean, there's a lot of fintechs out there who have great ideas, but the issue is they are only looking at one part of a very large value chain, right? So the key is to be able to work together, right? I think banks are now much more open in terms of working with fintechs, in terms of what the solutions that they can provide. And I think we learn from our U Solar program, as well as recently we launched our U Energy program as well, back in October, to say that, hey, we as a bank, we are not engineers. We cannot do what the industry can do, but what we can do is work with trusted partners that can provide data, or they can actually do the physical work themselves to help our clients to improve on their energy usage, and also have the ability to track, right, whether it's blockchain or whatever technology. I think this needs to work together, and going back to my point on regulatory, on taxonomy, and needs to be supported by policy as well. So from an overall perspective, then you can, if you put the triangle, I call it the triangle. If you put the triangle into work, then everyone play their part in terms of where the data is generated, how it's being tracked, and how it's being financed, and eventually then you can scale up sustainability, and you need these three angles to work together. Otherwise, you will always have a deficiency with regards to there's no data there for us to track, and then that's where greenwashing comes in, right? And second thing is also, if the corporates are not aware, or if there's no incentive for corporates to actually move into sustainability, then there is no demand, right? Recently, UOB did a survey, with clients across the region regards to their readiness for sustainability objectives, and it's no surprise that close to about 40% of the companies within the region are not aware of sustainability issues that are impacting their industry, right? And of course, because of that, then 80% of their clients have no knowledge or have little visibility in regards to any type of financing solutions that is available for them, right? So, but one thing that came out of the survey is a whopping 90% of the SME says that if they will consider incorporating ESG into their strategy for sustainability, if they can simplify for them, the business, right?
Interesting.
So a lot of there's a lot of myth out there regards that sustainability is only for large corporates, or sustainability is costly, right? And I think these are some of the things, the awareness that needs to be promoted, from a private sector side, together working hand in hand with the public sector to encourage the clients and to actually work with the banks, and also work with tech companies to actually ensures that these are all being done and being tracked, properly being tracked. Yeah.
Yeah, no, fascinating. I have this image in my mind now of kind of the cogs all interlinked, starting to turn. And which is great cause for optimism. But I think, as you said, it's easy to confuse sustainability as being something for the big guys, but not for everyone. But I think, Derrick, I mean, from your perspective, you've done a lot of work in terms of the STACS projects but others as well. How do you see the next 12 months then playing out? So we've talked about kind of what we've done to get us this far. We're getting better, we're specializing, we're understanding, we're building competencies, those cogs are starting to turn. From anyone who's watching this and thinking, right, okay, I get it, but I need to operationalize it from my own angle now. What do the next 12 months look like, do you think, in terms of the availability of solutions in the market? And also kind of, what do you think, how do you think that the overall ecosystem is going to evolve over the next 12 months?
Yep. I think there's going to be a lot of solutions. It's always when there's a lot of focus in an area, and tech providers, I think what we do is basically we take learning lessons from different industries and use cases, and we can repurpose the technology for ESG. For example, prior to Nexus, I was with the MES for 10 years as well. I see a lot of this ESG risk assessment evolving, not too different from how KYC was 10, 20 years ago. There was a lot of confusion. How do I assess different risks? But with I think with collective effort to push forward, you start seeing tools and systems being developed, data sources being trusted sources evolving. So I think the next 12 months there will be a lot of people who will become better at sourcing for data and consuming data in very, again, like I say, very specific use cases, very suited to their investment strategy, very sector specific or country specific. And from a tech perspective, I think it's really, really exciting. I think one of my asset management clients put it this way. We almost expect, analysts and client servicing stuff to be like superhuman, to be able to just, work in all this chaos and be able to structure loans and investments. I think this is where at Nexus, we really believe tech, especially drawing from our experience in other sectors and use cases, can be used to augment, I think, the sort of very manual data sourcing and aggregation work that needs to be done. So I think there'll be a lot of, I think from even in the asset management space, people trying out different tools and building their own frameworks. I think in my earlier sort of point, we're going to see a lot of version 1.0s being rolled out this year. There'll be a lot of, a lot more reporting. There'll be people who start wanting benchmarking tools. How is my framework versus you? I don't want to, be too critical, or how do I give you a loan when you get A and C from another bank, and then you go to other competitors. So I think some of these competitive elements also start to surface in the loan space and also in the investment space. I think in the investment space, a lot of it is driven by really client demand. I don't see as a regulatory, a lot about, our stakeholders require this, they want to know this, and how do we exercise stewardship. So I think being part of that whole picture is really important. And if I could just do a 10-second pitch, I think the solution that we built, I think with the asset managers, I think we've also very proud to be one of the 10 finalists being shortlisted for this year's FinTech Accelerator by MES of, I think, 280 over submissions. So if you want to check out how maybe we could work together, like what Jasper said, collectively solve this problem, we'll be more than happy to be able to help in any way possible. Thanks, Barney, for the question.
Brilliant. No, thank you. So look, we've got a few minutes in case anyone wants to ask any questions on the chat. I don't want to hoggle the conversation and all the expertise. If anyone does have any questions, then please send them through, and I think we can all see them, can't we? So we will watch with interest over the next few minutes. Maybe whilst we wait, though, I think a quick question. You kind of intimated it a little bit, Derrick, but Jasper, from your perspective, if we're at kind of step one, for example, 12 months ago, I'd be curious to know, out of, I don't know, let's say 100, where do you think we are now, and where do you think we will be in 12 months' time if last year was basically year one in terms of competency really managing this? To your point, sorry, just your point about KYC, Derrick, was really great because KYC is now so bedded in. It's such a business as usual process. If that's 100, where do you think we are on the process?
Okay, I'll take a stab at this. I think it varies from industry to industry, as well as from banks to banks. I think in Singapore we're fortunate enough that our regulators are wanting to be at the forefront and championing sustainability. So I think the Singaporean banks are moving quite ahead. In terms of our counterparts versus, the regional banks. Of course, if you're talking about global banks, they have better exposure across Europe and US, which are much far ahead than Asia. But I think it also depends on the landscape in where you're operating in. Right. So if you're talking about Singapore companies or environment, then we're probably in the scale of 1 to 100. We're probably at 30 or 40. Right. But if you go into other ASEAN countries, they may be just starting. The baby steps. Just starting off because the either the taxonomy is not ready or is whether the technology is not ready yet. Right. So does that mean that they are worse than the others? I don't think so, because if the economy continues to progress, and then obviously we will hope that the ASEAN countries will catch up. It will and maybe even leapfrog, because I think there's a lot of exciting tech companies that are actually operating in this part of the region that maybe in a sense that they can actually create something new, which is different from what the Europeans or the US companies are doing, right? So I believe that the technology needs to suit to the environment of where we are operating in, and so that we may take longer to get there, but obviously we will get there in the end.
That was the most perfectly worded, carefully worded answer, but I definitely agree with all of the sentiment behind it. Absolutely. Wei Han, do you have any other kind of contrasting view at all, or
no, not at all? Jasper answered that question perfectly, because
I was going to say, I'm sure I wouldn't like to try and put me on that. Thank you.
It's a tough one, but I think the notion, if we talk about at a country level, every country have different challenges. Is a public news that in this part of Asia, a lot of the energy is still through coal power plants. It's not easy for our Southeast Asia, India, and even China counterparts to really deal with this, but they are dealing with it. So I think there's a lot of optimism around that. As to my wish, I'm a avid scuba diver, and I love snowboarding. Just for things I love, I really hope the world collaborate a lot more. Don't stop at the COP26. I think the effort should just increase after this so-called monumental forum, and hopefully we'll jump to 100 really quickly.
Fingers crossed. No, exactly. Yeah. And I think one thing that will be a great follow-up conversation for another day is your point about the carbon trading oil. That's a necessary foundation that we could go for another hour easily. Derrick, the final word with you then. So your take in terms of where we are and what kind of speed you mentioned, version 0.1, moving on. What kind of do you get from a speed perspective? How fast do you feel that we are maturing and moving? And do you feel that is it kind of exponential? Are we accelerating at the right pace, do you think?
Yeah, I think in this part of the world, although some may argue that it's a bit slower than other parts, but I think like you mentioned, I think it's the speed of change. I think that it will be the key to make a difference. As long as we keep pushing, I think we do see the things accelerating. We see more teams, the basics being formed, putting together your ESG teams, frameworks, and I think there will be a lot of a sudden sort of tipping point where people will start getting the hang of this. So now we see teams starting to be formed, but once you see it become operational, it will run on its own like a train. I mean, the maybe just one parting point is, we are in the AI industry. Like how AI really accelerated was when there's a lot of collective effort, and there's a lot of sort of in our terminology, a lot of open sourcing of ideas and technology. And I truly believe if we take the same approach in ESG, then rather than creating all these data silos, taxonomy, if there's some way we can collectively garner and sort of open source, this even like digital taxonomies, I think it can really, really, really accelerate the change. Like what Jasper said, I think with technology coming into play, we are hopeful that we can catch up in due course.
Yeah. No, look, I think, and what's so fascinating is that on a global level, there are some fantastic projects out there. The TSVCM, stands out for me as being one of the real leaders in terms of trying to make it open source. But I think equally, in a Singapore context, the number of building blocks of that are being put in place now that, as you said, will operationalize quickly. We've talked about CIX, we've talked about other areas. You can really feel that basically that Singapore is on the cusp of really actually operationalizing a great deal of this, as opposed to just kind of staring and looking at it, which for me is unique in a global context, actually. So I think it's you may, sitting in Singapore, think, well, actually we're moving slowly. I think Singapore's moving extremely fast. So fingers crossed, fast can only go faster. But I think just to wind up, because we have finished now, I would just underline, I think for me, that the key takeaways for me, and thank you so much, Jasper, Wei Han, and Derrick, excuse me, specialism. Knowing what you're not. Jasper's point, I think, was a really, really great one in terms of actually coming to the table and knowing what you're not and what you are. The huge amounts of technical choice. And I think for me that the term of the conversation was basically a lot of guesswork and courage. I think is absolutely the foundation for this. So thank you very, very much for all of your insights. I think we got more than your 2 cents out of Wei Han. But look, really appreciate it, and I'm sure all of you guys are going to be available for more follow-up if anyone wants to reach out after this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, have a nice day.